Retreat on chapter 3. We've already seen some of the important points that came up about how to practice Karma Yoga. Because sometimes the theory of Karma Yoga is easy to grasp, but we often then figure out how in real life situations, how we practice it. And we already saw some of the ways of doing it. One was yesterday, we especially saw about the concept of yajna, how all of our activities can be done as a form of sacrifice. The second way we saw was also remembering the role of gunas, how it's possible to see every activity as the gunas of Prakriti, just playing with one another, and that it's possible for us to remain as a witness. Today, we'll try to see some of the hurdles that come in the path of the practice. Take a look at verse number 30, for instance. Vai sarvani karmani sanyasya adhyatma chetasa nirashir nirmamo bhutva yudhyasva vigatajvaraha. Renouncing all actions to me, with mind centered on the self, getting rid of hope and selfishness, fight, free from mental fever. There's a lot to unpack here, but take especially a look at getting rid of hope and selfishness. The two Sanskrit words here are nirashihi and nirmamaha. So very briefly, what is the role of hope in our life? Now, if we look at our life, we will see that all of us are hopeful about things, some things, and then we also feel hopeless about some other things. And that's true with every human being. Where we differ from one another is, what is it that I'm hopeful about? And what is it that I'm not hopeful about? And that can change from person to person. And when this verse says that getting rid of hope, we can ask ourselves, getting rid of hope about what? So in general, it's possible to say that it's best not to harbor any hope with matters related to the world. And that is because there are so many factors, so many forces operating in the world over which we have no control. For instance, now I just heard that it's been raining in the Pittsburgh area. Now, if someone just hoped, I hope it doesn't rain today. Now, you can keep on hoping, but if it is going to rain, it's going to rain. So my hope doesn't alter what is going to happen or what is not going to happen, because I don't control when it's going to rain and when it is not going to rain. But we will find that many of us keep hoping over things over which we don't have absolute control. On the other hand, many people, even those who do have a practice of prayer and meditation, don't feel so hopeful about their success in spiritual life. I've seen some people say, I'm trying my best. If I don't realize God in this life, maybe next life, or God knows when it'll happen. In other words, I'm still doing my practices, but not particularly hopeful that I'm going to become enlightened anytime soon. And so hopefulness and lack of hopefulness is present in our lives. What we want, ideally, what a karma yogi should have is completely reverse the course. And that is, can we be fully hopeful about our success in spiritual life? And as far as our duties and responsibilities in the world are concerned, we need to do it as best we can, carrying out our duties in the spirit of Karma Yoga, but not pin too much hope on anything, because it is sure to bring us some kind of pain, because not everything is going to happen the way we want it to happen. And so best, therefore, is to do the right thing and just say, let thy will be done. Whatever is good will happen through God's will. But as far as our own spiritual progress is concerned, it's very important that we remain hopeful. If we want to succeed in spiritual life, we cannot sit for meditation with the idea at the back of the mind that nothing much is going to happen in the next half an hour. So if you sit for meditation, then very likely it will be like a self-fulfilling prophecy. If I sit for prayer and meditation thinking that nothing much is going to happen, nothing will happen. So every time we sit for, because if we truly believe that Mother's grace, Ramakrishna's grace can come any minute, any moment, we have to be ready, we have to be alert, we have to be vigilant. And therefore, because that's why sometimes, we sit for meditation, we just plan, I'm going to sit for, let's say, meditate for half an hour. Sometimes people keep a clock in front of them and they already have things lined up. After my meditation, then I have to go shopping, I have to do this, I have to do that. And then meditation becomes one of the many things we have to complete in our day's chores. The problem with that is, if I'm already decided I'm going to meditate for 30 minutes and then said afterwards I've got to do these XYZ things, somewhere at the back of the mind is the feeling, nothing much is going to happen in the next 30 minutes. Let me just do what I feel, what I enjoy doing, but nothing much is going to happen. On the other hand, every time I sit for meditation, if I tell myself, maybe after 30 minutes or sometime within this sitting, Mother's grace will come. I may not have to go shopping at all. I may not have to cook for today. I will be a Jivan Mukta. That's possible. It's not a joke. I'm serious about it. So every time we sit with that hope in the heart, there is a greater chance we will succeed. And so when this verse says, getting rid of hope, what it means is getting rid of hope, not pinning too much hope on things that happen in this constantly changing, perishable world. We learn to take everything in our stride. Some things are going to be great, some things are going to be terrible, but we just kind of absorb it and then carry on. But as far as our spiritual life is concerned, we have to be filled with hope. So that's important. There are these, sometimes they are spoken of as the three important virtues needed in spiritual life is faith, hope, and love. Faith, in the word that is often used in our books, is Shraddha. Because only if there is faith that God is with me right now, this very moment, Ramakrishna, Holy Mother are here right now, that faith will generate hope that Mother's grace can come any minute. And with that faith and hope, my heart will be filled with love. These three are connected. So the extent of hope for our progress will come that is directly dependent on the strength of our faith, and how much of love for God is in our heart is directly dependent on how much of faith and how much of hope we have. So when it is saying getting rid of hope, keep in mind what kind of hope we are expected to get rid of. And finally, selfishness. The Sanskrit word is nirmama. So ego, about which we spoke much yesterday, can manifest in two different ways in our life. Aham and mama, I and mine. Sometimes these two manifestations of the ego are called the primary ego and the secondary ego. So everything I denote by the term I is the primary ego. Everything I denote by the term mine, that is a secondary ego. Now, both are ways in which the ego manifests, but the I is something that sticks a bit too hard. And mine is also a problem, but a little bit less problem than I. Now, the example is simply this, and it's an example I've often given. That is, let's say you have bought a new device, a new iPhone, or if you have seen now, they aren't yet been available, the new product Apple announced earlier this week. What's that? Apple Vision Pro. It's the enhanced. Of course, they are not available still. So you get some very fancy, expensive device which you have been wanting for a long time, and then so you're just returning home with that device in your pocket, and then it's late in the evening. There's not too many people on the road, and suddenly somebody comes and sticks a gun in your back and says, "Give me whatever you have with you, or I'm just going to shoot you." Now here, really, you have this very expensive device you wanted, and you are reluctant to part with it. But on the other hand, you're going to lose your life. So here is a kind of a choice between me and mine. Now, will anybody in their right mind say, take my life, take this life if you want, you can kill me, but I'm not going to give this device? At that point, we'll say, my life, my existence is more important than something that I said, okay, take this and let me go. So whenever there is a choice between I and mine, and we are expected to choose only one, we will always choose the I. And so relatively speaking, mine is easier to give up than I. So one of the ways of dealing with the ego is try to make everything that I see as I into mine. In other words, clearly, mostly what we see as I is basically our body and mind. But sometimes people can get so identified with even apparently external objects that sometimes they treat it as if it was themselves. Let's say somebody has a big business somewhere, and there's some calamity, the entire business place is on fire, and it's completely reduced to ashes. And this person is so grief-stricken, so devastated. The person says, I am ruined. Now, I'm not ruined. I'm completely, perfectly fine. It's just my business and the building that's gone. But at that moment, I feel that that building is me, because the ruin of that building has become like my ruin. But generally, our I usually gets restricted to the body and mind, and everything else becomes a possession, mine, mama. So can I consciously try to look upon my body and mind as mine, as a possession? Just like we have our computers, we have our cars, we have our phones, we know that they are useful, we use them, and we take good care of them. Exactly in the same way, can I look upon my body and mind as God-given instruments that I was born with right from the time I was born. And just like as I take good care of my car and other stuff, I'm going to take good care of the body and mind. But they are not me, they are mine. So first step in loosening the hold of the body and mind upon me would be to look upon the body and mind as mine, as my instruments. I'll take good care of them, but they are not me. And so these are the two things that must be kept in mind, because these two things, this pinning too much hope on this perishable world and extending the sense of ownership. And it's ownership not just about things. We have ownership about the people around us. We want to own people. This is my friend. This is my family. These are my people. All this is, we are just extending that sense of ownership. So all of these things contribute towards bringing pain and sorrow and suffering in our life. So the best thing is to love everyone, to take care of everyone, to be helpful, to do everything that we do, but deep down in our hearts, knowing that nothing is really mine. And it's easy to remember that because if we try hard, because when we come into this life, we come with nothing. The only thing we come with, suddenly we find we are born and we discover we have a body and mind. We don't bring anything. When we go away, we don't go away with anything. Everything is left behind. So the sense of ownership of things possessing this or that is this interim period when we extend the sense of self and say, this is mine, this is mine. So the more we are able to let go, the happier it'll be. Now, that doesn't mean we should just go to a forest and leave aside everything. That's not the idea. It's possible to apparently give up everything and go to a forest and yet retain that sense of ownership. So simply physically going away from things is not going to solve the problem. What we want is be in the midst of everything, have everything around you, but deep down in your heart, know none of this is mine. Sri Ramakrishna gives the example of a maid servant who lived usually, I don't know how, it might be not so much in modern times, but in India, even today, in some places, it still exists, that in some parts of the world probably, that usually there will be some of the wealthy families especially will have some servants, and they are usually brought from some distant rural areas, and they kind of live with the family. It's not a daytime job. They almost live like a part of the family. So much so that I've seen in my uncle's home when I was growing up, in my uncle's place, they were very wealthy, and they had some 2 or 3 people who lived in the family, doing all the household chores, and they'd become so much a part of the family. They could scold the children of my cousins who are growing up as if they are related. Essentially, technically they were just servants, but they had become so much a part of the family, they could do all this thing that elders in the family would do. But deep down in their heart, everyone knew this is not really their family. Their family is back home in their villages. That's how a devotee will see that my eternal connection, my eternal relationship is with God. God is my father, God is my mother. Yes, I'll have my biological parents, I'll have my family, my children, my grandchildren. A devotee sees that all of these are gifts given by God. All of these belong to God. It's a little bit like if you have a pet, a dog or a cat, and you're going on a vacation somewhere, and then maybe you're not able to take your pet along with you. Then if you trust your neighbors, you can say, could you please keep my dog with you for a while, and I'll be back. And so the dog remains with them, and if the neighbors are good, they'll take good care of your dog. But sometimes they might get attached to your dog, but they will always have to remember this is not theirs. When it's time, when you return, that dog will come back to you. Exactly in the same way, just as we entrust the things that we love to people whom we trust and love, similarly, God has entrusted everything that we see as our own, our friends, our family, everything that we possess really belongs to God. And God has given them to us and saying, take good care of these things. So whenever we take care of our people who are our own, we should do it because they are God's gift. And then because we love God, we love all of them. So we continue doing exactly what we are doing now, but remembering that nothing and no one belongs to us, that they all belong to God. Now that's the attitude. And that's why this getting rid of selfishness means stopping ourselves from appropriating things and people as our own. So that's the first hurdle. Pinning hope on the perishable things and being selfish. If I want to be a karma yogi, I cannot do these things. The second would be, look at verse 33. Sadrisham cheshtate swasyaha prakritir jnanavanapi prakritim yanti bhutani nigrahav kim karishyati. Even a wise person acts in accordance with his own nature. Beings follow nature. What can restraint do? Now, this is one of the major problems, that sometimes we understand the theory behind everything, but where we fail miserably, oftentimes, is in putting it into practice. And that is because Prakritim Yanti Bhutani, there is just the muscle memory of the body and the muscle memory of the mind also, so to speak. We keep on doing things mechanically the way we have been doing them. Our past habits, our samskaras, they force us to do things, even if intellectually we know what's the right thing to do. We are unable to do it because our past habits, past ways of thinking take us in a direction very different from where I would like to go. So it's almost like we are dragged against our wish. Now, that's a problem. And that's a problem in practice of karma yoga, because we learn that we must practice detachment. We must do things without expecting results. But we have been doing now that way for years and years and years, maybe lives and lives and lives. Now, we cannot change suddenly overnight. So our past habits will drag us in that direction. And therefore, what we want is being vigilant, being alert, and using our willpower. And that's why willpower, I said earlier that Karma Yoga is primarily meant to purify and discipline our willpower as it manifests through our activities in the external world. And so we need to apply this willpower strongly so that our life doesn't become mechanical. Because that's what it is. You see, we sometimes think that there are certain things that are important and I need to concentrate on those things. But there are certain other things which don't need that much concentration. And so, for instance, now, many of us are just programmed. You wake up in the morning, you go, wash your face, brush your teeth, take a shower, and we think, all of these things I've been doing all my life. I don't need to focus on them. I don't need to concentrate on them. But there are certain other things I need to do with attention. The problem with that way of thinking is that we just have one mind. The same mind that is functioning when I'm brushing my teeth and taking my shower and drinking my cup of tea is the same mind that I use for doing my meditation. Is the same mind that I might do while driving. It's the same mind that I need to do 100 other things throughout the day. So if my mind has gotten used to doing all these little things like showering, brushing, drinking tea, and so on in a mechanical way, then that mind has a tendency to do even everything else in a mechanical way as well. And so we need to change that. Can I make my mind do everything mindfully, do everything with alertness? We might say, why do I need to be so alert while drinking a cup of tea? I think it is great fun in being alert while drinking a cup of tea. You might enjoy your tea more if you are alert. You might brush your teeth better. You might feel yourself better if you are, even during a shower, you are very alert about it. One of the things that I remember years ago when I was getting my driving lessons. The trainer I had was a really wonderful person, very elderly person. And what he said was, he said, every time, and the importance of showing every time you're turning right or turning left, just to put the right light, the signals about when you are turning. And clearly being, well, one of the things that I asked the trainer was, okay, I understand that when you're turning left, you should show the left signal. When you're turning right, you show the signal right. But I said, what if the road itself turns left? Should I show my left signal if the road itself is turning? And then he smiled. I'm sure hundreds of other people must have asked him that question. And he said, yes, just do it. And the reason was, he said, even if the road itself is turning left, and if you show the left signal, you're not doing anything illegal. You're not doing anything wrong. Or maybe the person behind you is new to the city, may not know that the road is turning left. You're actually helping someone who is behind, who may not know the topography of the city. But the reason he told me that was, he said, if your actions become instinctive, that every time you turn your wheel, your hand goes, or your hand goes and you show the signal. Every time you turn to the left or left, I'm getting it wrong, you show your signal. He says, let it become so instinctive that the next time you won't have to think about it. And because he says sometimes a fraction of a second of a delay can sometimes be very costly in terms of the effect it can have. And so he said, just make it a part of your thinking. I like that point very much, because instead of thinking, oh, this activity doesn't need focus, I'm going to do it mechanically. This activity needs focus, I'm going to concentrate. Why do all these distinctions? Why not just train the mind that whatever it is engaged in, no matter how apparently insignificant an activity it might be, I'm going to do it with full attention. And if I'm able to do small things with full attention, I'll be able to do big things with full attention as well. And that's why this verse 33 points out a second or a third, depending on how you number these obstacles, hurdle in Karma Yoga. That people doing things mechanically, people thinking in a mechanical way. Nothing in life should be mechanical. If we want to be spiritual, if we want to make progress, then vigilance is absolutely important. In fact, right now, we should at least try to be vigilant in the waking state. Right now, we don't so much have control over our sleep state. We don't so much have control over what kind of dreams we are going to have. It's almost like in the old, way back in India, when television first started, sometimes in early 70s, we just had one channel. You had no control over what program you want. Now there are hundreds of channels. You can choose what you want to see. But in the early days, there was really no choice. You just had to switch on the television, and whatever there is, it could be boring, it could be interesting, you had to see it. Actually, presently, our sleep is a little bit like that. It's a one-channel television. You have no idea what kind of dream is going to come. Sometimes it may be very pleasant, sometimes it could be a nightmare, sometimes it could be nothing. We just don't know. But at least in the waking state, we can try to be vigilant. We can try to be alert. That's important for a karma yogi. Once we succeed doing that in the waking state to a measurable degree, it will be possible to extend that awareness even in sleep. Sometimes these books describe how yogis can control their dream. If a dream is not going to be something interesting, the yogis say, okay, I don't want to watch this movie. I want some fun dream to see. Essentially, it's possible to be aware even in sleep. But right now, don't worry about sleep. Right now, just hope that you have as more pleasant dreams than unpleasant ones. But at least in the waking state, we all can try to remain vigilant as much as possible. Look at verse 34. It mentions two other obstacles in the practice of Karma Yoga. Indriyasya indriyasyarthe ragadveshau vyavasthitau tayor na vashama gachet tau hiyasya paripanthinau. Attachment and aversion of the senses by their respective objects are natural, but let none come under their sway. They are his foes. The Gita sometimes uses this strong language that these two, raga and dvesha, attachment and hatred, are both obstacles. They are enemies. Attachment, of course, we have seen on earlier occasion as well, of how both attachment and hatred lead to grief and sorrow and suffering in many different ways. And this is something we all have experienced in our own lives as well. In general, it is helpful in spiritual life to not have too strong attachments and too strong things we hate. In the beginning, there are always going to be things we like, and there are always going to be things we dislike. That's just human nature. The very first thing we can do is, it's easy to say, be neutral and don't have any likes and dislikes. Okay, we know that's the ideal. But in real life situations, there's always sometimes there are things we like, there are people we like and there are people we don't like, things we like and things we don't like. Now, the first step that all of us can try to do is at least not have too strong likes and too strong dislikes. Yes, likes and dislikes, okay, but not such a profound dislike towards something or a profound attachment towards something, because that really brings very immediate pain and sorrow in different forms. Because, well, there are really hundreds of different ways it can be painful. But if we have mild likes and mild dislikes, then it's easier to work with them, easier to see, easier to detach ourselves from them. But these two, attachment and aversion, in fact, although they're kind of mentioned as two different things, attachment and aversion or hatred, they both are really attachment. Hatred is also kind of attachment. Because normally when we think about attachment, we always think in terms of you like something, you love something and you are attached to it. But actually, we can be attached to something or someone through hatred. In fact, in some of the Vaishnava scriptures, they say that Kamsa, who was this very terrible, evil, maternal uncle of Krishna, who in fact tried to kill Krishna as a baby several times and was his lifelong foe, lifelong enemy. It is said that when this Kamsa died, this evil mama died, he immediately ascended to heaven. He immediately got a very high position. And that doesn't make sense. And now this way it is expressed to show the effect of being in the company of the divine. That God is the source of all purity. Krishna was the source of all purity. Now, devotees will of course think of Krishna, devotees of course think of God, and being in the company of the divine, that purity, that perfection of the divine seeps into us, and those are the qualities then we imbibe. But this Kamsa, he hated Krishna so much that day and night he thought of Krishna out of hatred. So it was through hatred that he was attached to Krishna. But in one way or the other, he was still attached to Krishna. And therefore, that greatness, that purity, perfection of Krishna seeped into him, and then that liberated him. Now, whether it actually liberated him or not, only Kamsa knows. But the idea here is that even through hatred, people can get attached. In fact, in some devotional scriptures, they describe different kinds of devotion. And it's going to sound weird, but one of the types of devotion is called Vairi Bhakti. The different kind of relationships we can have with the divine. And the classical ones, of course, we know, looking upon ourselves, God as the father, God as the mother, God as a child, God as a friend, God as the master, all those things we know. God as the enemy, Vairi Bhakti. And so many of the texts show that these lifelong enemies of the divine, Ravana in Ramayana, this Kamsa, Shishupala also is one other example that's often given, that all of these people hated the divine so much, but because that intense hatred, they remained connected with the divine, and that purified them. Now, that's not the kind of devotion I would recommend. It's not something that we need to practice, but the idea is to recognize that hatred is also a kind of attachment. So actually we should have no attachment. And see, attaching ourselves we can only attach to something that we are not. And so we are already the pure and perfect self. We are the Atman. We don't have to be attached to the Atman. We cannot be attached to the Atman because we are the Atman. So my awareness of my true identity gets hidden because I'm attached to everything else. When these attachments go away, my own true shining self will shine forth. And then finally, let's look at these two verses, 36 and 37. Arjuna asks this question, a kind of question that all of us may ask. Athakena prayuktoyam papam charati purushaha anichannapi varshneya bala divaniyo jitaha. Arjuna said, but impelled by what does a man commit sin, though against his wishes, O Varshneya, constrained as it were by force. So what is it that impels us to do the things that we shouldn't be doing? And Krishna answers, Kama esha krodha esha rajo guna samudbhavaha mahashano mahapapma vidyenam miha vairinam. The Blessed Lord said, it is desire, it is anger, born of the Rajoguna, of great craving and of great sin. Know this as the foe here in this world. So what was said earlier, attachment and aversion, in a different way we read here, it is desire and anger. Again, apparently seem to be two different things, but not really true, because it is desire, that it is attachment and desire, they are connected. The moment I desire something, I'm attached to it. And when there is an obstacle in the path of acquiring what I'm attached to, what I want, then there is anger. So all of these things here are mentioned as separate things, but they are all very connected. And at the root of all of this is attachment. And attachment comes from ignorance of our true nature. And the practice of Karma Yoga is really meant to remove this darkness of ignorance from our heart so that we know who we truly are. So to summarize some of the thoughts that we get from the chapter 3 in the Gita, first is that we must be aware of the nature of our work, the attitude, the motivation, the attachment, the result. So whatever we do in life, it's good to, because a lot of times we just take everything for granted, which is not a very helpful way to go about our life. So question everything, question even the things that seem very obvious, and ask yourself, why am I doing this? How I'm doing this? What am I expecting to get out of it? Is it worth the time and energy I've invested into this activity? The more we ask such questions, we will discover that many of the things that we were doing, which we felt were necessary, probably were not all that important. Or some of the things which we're not doing, and we might think, oh, that was something I have neglected for a long time. That is something I should be doing. And so this kind of a self-questioning is very helpful. The second thing we saw was, of course, how to work as a yajna, the sacrifice that is occurring in the external world and that can occur in our own life as well. The third is to be mindful of the destructive desires and anger. The fourth point is to lead a self-disciplined life and to practice self-restraint. And finally, through Karma Yoga, we can reach the highest, like Janaka and others. So do not think of Karma Yoga as some kind of a preliminary practice before we go to this so-called higher practices of jnana and others. That Karma Yoga in itself, done perfectly, it can give us the highest truth. So these are some of the main points that we were able to reflect a little bit deeply on during these 3 days that we met. I have kept a little extra time today so that more of you will have a chance to express your ideas. And if you have any questions, if you need any clarification, I shall try to answer your questions, but only if I know the answer. Otherwise, I'll tell you, sorry, I don't know.